Hello Internet, it's me Josh, the Aging Gamer. So this year marks the 40th anniversary of the one and only Donkey Kong. Happy birthday DK! And I guess happy birthday to Pauline and Mario too. On July 9th, 1981, Nintendo released the game Donkey Kong in the arcades. It wasn't Nintendo's first game, but it was the one that definitely put them on the map. And it wasn't just because of people claiming high scores or because they got sued by Universal, it's because the game itself was very engaging. You control Jumpman through a construction site to try and save your lady from the evil runaway gorilla, Donkey Kong. This was one of the first arcade games to really feature a story. It wasn't just spaceships shooting things, this was a game with changing levels and actual characters. It's also one of the first games to have a jumping mechanic, which is crazy to think about, but this was 40 years ago. Things were different. So after the recent E3 presentation, it appears like Nintendo has no plans to celebrate Donkey Kong's 4 decades of existence, so goddammit, I'll do it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the game that started it all, Donkey Kong! So you play as the pre-Mario Jumpman, and get this, you have to jump to avoid obstacles to make your way to your woman without being killed. Once you reach her, Donkey Kong escapes. There's 4 levels you'll go through, or only 3 if you're playing the NES version, and once you reach the end here, you crush Donkey Kong and win. But the game keeps going. Donkey Kong isn't actually about finishing a story. Like most arcade titles, it's about racking up a bunch of points. So that's Donkey Kong. I guess all in all it's really not that exciting, so let's go ahead and talk about its sequel. No, not Donkey Kong 2. That's not a thing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Donkey Kong Jr. In this game, you play as Donkey Kong's son, Donkey Kong Jr., and you're on a mission to save your dad from the evil Mario. Oh, how the tables have turned. The idea from the first game is applied here, where you want to avoid obstacles and traps to reach the end of the level. Rather than focusing on jumping, though, Donkey Kong Jr. focuses on climbing, which would make sense having you play as a baby gorilla rather than Jumpman again. There's only 4 stages here as well, and it's of course a score-based game, so the game constantly loops, getting more difficult with each run. While I do enjoy this game more than the first, if you're not into arcade-styled games, then this one likely won't grasp your interest very long. As for the character of Donkey Kong Jr. himself, he got a bit popular from this game. He appeared in Donkey Kong Jr. Math, the first Super Mario Kart, had a pretty decent role in Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, and had a few cameos elsewhere. His last major appearance was in Mario Tennis for the Nintendo 64, before he just kinda went MIA. And that's pretty much it for Donkey Kong Jr. the game. What else can I really say about it? Well, I've come this far, I might as well talk about the 3rd title in the series. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Donkey Kong 3! In Donkey Kong 3, Donkey Kong is on the loose and causing a ruckus in a greenhouse, and it's up to Stanley the Bugman to stop him. Instead of calling animal control, we're gonna try and poison Donkey Kong by shooting toxic fumes up his butt. But beware, there's bugs that will also ruin your garden, and they might mess you up too. Shoot Donkey Kong away and you'll go through several screens of similarity. Yeah, that's the premise of the game. The most interesting thing to note here is that instead of jumping or climbing, this game is more of a shooter than anything, and I feel it's a pretty weak one at that. Donkey Kong 3 feels really out of place compared to the other games. It goes from saving someone you love from someone you hate to, getting a gorilla out of your garden and shooting bugs. But that's all the Donkey Kong games on the NES and the arcade. They're just alright games. Me personally, I don't really care for score-based games where you just try to reach a high score. I like my games with stories, with beginnings and ends, something with a little bit more substance. So what the hell, I want to talk about a really good Donkey Kong game. A game that made history. A game that made me fall in love with Donkey Kong. Not literally. Let's talk about the game that changed Donkey Kong from an arcade classic to a platforming legend. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. Released in late 1994, Donkey Kong Country was the first game not developed by Donkey Kong's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto. While he did contribute some ideas, this game was mainly held in the hands of developer Rare. And man, Donkey Kong Country was a big freaking deal when it came out. Pardon the pun, but people were going bananas over it. It could have been because of Nintendo's heavy advertising, or it could have been because we were seeing a revival of an iconic video game character, or maybe it was just because it looked like a damn fun game. And not just fun as in it looked like, it had great ideas or great gameplay, just visually it looked like nothing else at the time. Rare made actual 3D models and was able to compress them into Super Nintendo sprites, and in-game, they looked really good. The characters just have so much character. The faces and movements were amazing. It made the whole game just so unique looking, especially back in 1994. Again, there was nothing else like it. And as someone who did not have a Super Nintendo growing up, I was more of a Genesis kid, this game right here was the game that made me jealous of Super Nintendo owners. So let's get to the premise of the game. You play as the one and only Donkey Kong. Except he's not actually Donkey Kong. That Donkey Kong is an old man now, known as Cranky Kong. This Donkey Kong is Cranky's grandson, which possibly makes him the son of Donkey Kong Jr. I don't know. Nintendo seems to take the Disney approach on the whole parent situation and just cuts them out completely for all their characters. Anyway, Donkey Kong and company live on Donkey Kong Island. One day, the evil King K. Rool and his horde of Kremlings take over the island and steal Donkey Kong's horde of bananas. It's up to Donkey Kong and his best pal Diddy Kong to save the day. And a bit of trivia, Diddy Kong was actually going to be a updated version of Donkey Kong Jr. before Nintendo nixed the idea because they thought the change in design was just a bit too much. While I'm totally fine with this game's protagonists the way they are, there's something just so wholesome about a dad and his son going on a big adventure that I think would have been neat to see. So throughout this side-scroller, you play as both Donkey Kong and Diddy. You can switch back and forth between the two at any time. Both of them can jump, swim, swing from vines, and do a little roll. There are some minor differences between the two though. Diddy Kong is able to jump a little bit higher and move a little bit faster. However, there's certain enemies he can't even harm because he's so small. Donkey Kong, on the other hand, can jump and kill almost any enemy and has an exclusive ground slap move. When you ground slap an enemy, you can collect a banana. Collect 100 bananas and you get an extra life. You can also gain extra lives by collecting the Kong letters scattered throughout levels. While playing, it only takes one hit to lose. If your hit is either Donkey Kong or Diddy, the other will come into play. Now if they're hit, you're dead. Look for these DK barrels throughout the levels to rescue whichever character you're not playing as. As you progress through the world map, you'll find other Kongs that will help you out through your journey. Cranky Kong will give you some helpful hints and vague clues on where to find secrets. Funky Kong will let you use his jumbo barrel to travel between worlds. And lastly, there's Candy Kong, who will save your game for you. Luckily, with today's technology of save states and whatnot, she's a bit useless, but back on the original console, she was a godsend. Throughout this game, you aren't going to find any power-ups like a Fire Flower or Blue Shield. Instead, power-ups come in the forms of DK's animal buddies. You can find Rambi the Rhino. He's a strong, fast animal that can kill any enemy and can also find secret passages. There's Winky the Frog, who has a pretty high jump. Espresso the Ostrich is fast and can also flutter down slowly, allowing you to get some really good distance. And lastly, there's Unguard the Swordfish that lets you swim faster and can stab enemies. There's also Squawks the Parrot, who only appears in one level and all he does is hold a lantern for you. It's not until the sequel where he actually becomes playable. But with all these things combined, there's a lot of variety in gameplay. So I'll be honest, going back to this after not playing it for quite some time, I was expecting it to feel a bit dated, but it actually holds up really well. It's not just your standard jump around platformer, there's a lot more to it. There's lots of clever level designs here. Some levels have you swinging from vine to vine with split-second reactions to avoid death. There's also barrel blasting levels that require complete accuracy. There's the occasional butt-clenching minecart levels that just have everything thrown at you too. Then there's some really unique levels like this one that requires you to turn on lights to avoid getting mauled by a shadow kremling. Or this other level that requires you to go out of your way to get fuel for your moving platform to get through the level. It's things like this that make all the levels feel a bit unique. There's also a variety of stage types. You got your standard jungle levels, but there's also caverns, ruins, icy mountains that are a bit slippery, mines, industrial zones, the forest, and there's even some underwater stages. You'll even travel through an Ewok village. Overall, this game can be on the difficult side. To me, nothing feels like it's impossible, but there's quite a few sections that will have you grinding your teeth. The gameplay is great, and from a presentation standpoint, it's just so beautiful. Like I mentioned, the visuals are amazing. The levels, the backgrounds, the characters are all nicely done. Little touches like the sun setting in the first level, or the rain passing and the sun coming out in the second stage. It makes the game feel more alive. And the music, oh god, the music! The soundtrack was composed by David Wise, who, before this game, was mostly known for his work on Battletoads. He does fantastic work here. The music really sets the tone for each level. It's not just blaring feel-good jungle drums or whatever on each level. Some of them feel dramatic or even have a somber feel. Each theme fits the stage. It's engaging, and I feel his work gets even better in the sequels. This game just does so many things right. Does it have its faults? Well, yeah. To me, the weakest part of the game is its boss fights. There's a total of 6 worlds you'll go through with a boss at the end of each one, plus the final showdown with King K. Rool. But some of the bosses feel so out of place. You'll go through these tricky designed levels, but have a boss like Very Naughty, who just jumps around, you bop him on the head a few times, and he's done for. Master Neki is also kind of a weak boss. To defeat this giant vulture head, just jump over his coconuts and jump on his noggin. Even King K. Rool isn't too hard of a boss. Once you know his not-so-complicated patterns, it's a breeze. With how tough this game can get, I'm just surprised the majority of the bosses aren't at that same level. Also, if you want to count this as a flaw, the game is a lot shorter than I remember. There's 40 levels total, and depending on how much trouble the game gives you, it can be beat in 2 or so hours, with speedrunners 100%ing the game in just under an hour. But its shortness is kind of made up for with the replay value this game offers. There's lots of hidden bonuses within the levels. Some are secret barrels that are kind of hidden, or there's some hidden passages that require some effort to find. You'll know when you found all the secrets in a level when the level name has an exclamation point at the end. The more secrets you find, the higher percentage you'll have on your save file. So even after you beat the game, you can still try and get the max 101%. So Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo, does it still hold up? Well, obviously my answer is yes. And not only that, but I think it's one of those games that everyone at some point in their life should play. There's thousands of platformers out there, but there's only one Donkey Kong Country. Scratch that. And the game, despite its hard difficulty, is really fun. The mix-up in gameplay, the environments you'll explore, the hidden secrets everywhere, the wonderful music, the fantastic visuals and characters you'll meet. It's an awesome experience. There's a reason this is the 3rd best-selling game on the console, got multiple remakes, and spawned a bunch of sequels. It's just that damn good. And it actually saddens me that Nintendo doesn't do much with the Donkey Kong series anymore. Despite Donkey Kong being a pop culture icon, I almost feel like he's underrated. The Donkey Kong series has a pretty good track record. I mean, the arcade games are what they are, but all the Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo are all 10 out of 10s. The Donkey Kong Land games for the Game Boy are also fantastic. Donkey Kong and its sequel, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, are really fun games, and some of my favorites on their respective handhelds. Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii, and Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze for the Wii U are also top-notch side-scrollers and worthy sequels. And while I don't personally care for Donkey Kong 64, a lot of people love that game. I suppose there was that awkward decade or so of Nintendo not knowing what to do with DK. The King of Swing series was an interesting take, but it wasn't anything amazing. The Donkey Konga series and Jungle Beat seems to be remembered more for its bongos and not so much for the games itself. And the racing game was, well, bleh. So I guess there are a few stinkers, but when Donkey Kong is good, it's damn good. They got the series back on track with Donkey Kong Country Returns for the Wii and Tropical Freeze for the Wii U. I want to see more of that. Or why not try taking another crack at the 3D platforming? Like I mentioned, I don't really care for Donkey Kong 64, but I'd like to see what they can do now. Donkey Kong was once one of Nintendo's top series, a mascot right behind Mario. Sure, he's just a tie-wearing gorilla that can't speak, but he's one of my favorite gaming heroes. Hopefully Nintendo brings the series back. The series deserves it. But these are just my opinions. What do you guys think? What do you think of Donkey Kong Country? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see future videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And like always, I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all on the next one.